Your OpenAPI spec converts to MCP components automatically. But what if you need to tweak every single one before they're exposed to AI models? We'll use a custom component function to systematically modify descriptions, add tags, and apply type-specific formatting to every generated tool and resource. You'll see exactly how to intercept and enhance components right after they're created, but before they're registered with the server. From FastMCP, server, OpenAPI import, HTTP route, OpenAPI tool, OpenAPI resource, OpenAPI resource template, hash if using experimental parser, import from experimental module, hash from FastMCP, experimental server, OpenAPI import, hash HTTP route, hash OpenAPI tool, hash OpenAPI resource, hash OpenAPI resource template, hash def customize components, root HTTP route, component OpenAPI tool, OpenAPI resource, OpenAPI resource template, none, hash add custom tags to all components, component tags add OpenAPI, hash customize based on component type, if instance, component OpenAPI tool, component description equals F, component description via API, if instance, component OpenAPI resource, component description equals F, component description, component tags add data, MCP equals FastMCP from OpenAPI, OpenAPI spec equals spec, client equals client, MCP component, FN equals customized components. This demonstrates the component customization pattern for API-to-MCP transformation. The code shows how to intercept and modify auto-generated MCP components during the OpenAPI conversion process, applying consistent metadata and behavior changes across all endpoints. What makes this distinctive is its ability to apply cross-cutting modifications without altering the original OpenAPI spec or client implementation. The pattern works by injecting a post-processing function into the conversion pipeline. After FastMCP generates components from OpenAPI routes, but before they're finalized, your customizer function receives each component, allowing you to modify descriptions, add tags, or adjust behavior based on component type. This creates a clean separation between the declarative API specification and the imperative customization logic, keeping your transformation rules centralized and maintainable. This approach solves the common problem of needing API-specific optimizations for LLM clients without forking the OpenAPI spec. You get consistent component behavior across hundreds of endpoints while keeping the customization logic decoupled from both the API definition and the MCP server implementation. It's particularly valuable when exposing existing APIs to AI systems, where you often need to add LLM-specific context or organization that wasn't present in the original API design. Let's break it down. From FastMCP, server, OpenAPI import. This imports FastMCP's OpenAPI integration components, which bridge HTTP routes and OpenAPI specs to AI-callable tools. These classes handle the conversion between web APIs and FastMCP's tool resource model, enabling seamless AI interaction with existing REST services. Hash if using experimental parser, import from experimental module. Hash from FastMCP, experimental server, OpenAPI import. This commented import shows the alternative path for experimental features. FastMCP maintains a separate experimental module for unstable APIs, letting you opt into cutting-edge functionality while keeping the stable API clean. Def customize components. Root HTTP route. Component, OpenAPI tool, OpenAPI resource, OpenAPI resource template. To none. Hash add custom tags to all components. Component tags add, OpenAPI. This callback function standardizes metadata across all OpenAPI components. By adding the OpenAPI tag to every component, it ensures consistent categorization in the generated API documentation. The pattern centralizes metadata management in one place, preventing inconsistencies across different endpoint types. Hash customized based on component type. If instance, component OpenAPI tool. Component description equals F. Component description via API. This applies type-specific customization to OpenAPI tool components. It appends via API to the description, clearly distinguishing API-based tools from other component types in the generated documentation. The pattern ensures consistent metadata formatting across all tool types. If instance, component OpenAPI resource. Component description equals F. Component description. Component tags add data. This handles OpenAPI resource components specifically. It ensures consistent formatting by adding a leading space to descriptions and tags them as data for categorization. This pattern maintains uniform metadata across all resource types. MCP equals FastMCP from OpenAPI. OpenAPI spec equals spec. This instantiates FastMCP from an OpenAPI specification, converting API endpoints into AI callable tools. The OpenAPI spec parameter defines the available operations, endpoints, and schemas that FastMCP will expose as tools. This is the standard entry point for API-based tool creation in FastMCP. OpenAPI component customization. The MCP component FN hook lets you modify MCP components after creation, enabling dynamic tagging, description enhancement, and type-specific adjustments without altering the original OpenAPI spec. Modifications are in place only. Returning values from this function has no effect. This pattern bridges static API definitions with dynamic runtime requirements.
The component that never changes becomes infinitely adaptable.